What's going on? This is Dylan with Dylan Talks Tone. So, as a result of our last video about buzz and where all that stuff comes from, we're going to talk about ground loops because there was some very interesting interaction in the comments to that video, and actually we see this all over the internet anyway. So we're going to talk about the misconceptions about a ground loop and what it actually is and how to fix it and how to not fix it, and how some stuff that you do in a guitar doesn't have anything to do with the ground loop, even though people really want to believe that it does. Hey, what's up, y'all? Remember, before we get into this video, we're doing a giveaway on that cable wrangler thing. So I'll put one of those little gray boxes. You can go watch that video and leave a note in the comments and become part of that giveaway. And I will let you know in the next couple of weeks when we actually give that thing away to somebody. But you got to comment on that video, so go check it out. Let's first of all start with the guitar itself. I'm just going to say it. You can't have a ground loop within a guitar. So this guitar right here can't have a ground loop. If it's not plugged into anything, actually, you know what? We're going to go one step at a time. We're plugged into the amp. That guitar cannot have a ground loop. It's plugged into the amp. It cannot have a ground loop. And here's why. If you look at this diagram, this is the basic setup of an electronic circuit in a guitar. As you will notice, all of the grounds terminate in one place. In order for there to be a ground loop, there has to be some situations that are present. All right, so we have to have two electronic components. So we're just going to draw squares. Okay, so this is an electronic component, and they are both grounded. So that's the schematic for ground. And because they're both grounded, that means that they're both connected. And typically that's in a house that's grounded outside somewhere. So you have two it doesn't matter what it is, two electronic components, both grounded. So we'll call this an amp and another amp. How about that? So then we need to connect them together. So if there is a signal wire here, now we have a ground loop. We have the possibility for a ground loop because the cable that goes in between the two amps has a ground. Then we have the two grounds that go down, and so now you have a loop. If you do not have two components that are grounded, you don't have a ground loop. The reason this is relevant here is because no matter what's in a guitar, it all terminates to the same ground, which is right here. And it is not a loop. You just can't have a ground loop in a guitar. So all this weird stuff about star grounding and all this other stuff has nothing to do with it. There's no ground loop here. There just is not. Where we have a ground loop, like we just mentioned in the drawing, is two electronic components that are grounded and a signal connecting them. An example what could be if we have my Kemper over here, my mixing board here, and the signal wires that connect the two of them. There's a possibility now for a ground loop because this is grounded to the wall. This is grounded to the wall. The ground is common between them. And now we have grounded cables going between them. It's possible that you could have a ground loop. You actually always have a ground loop in that situation, provided you don't touch anything. But sometimes you don't hear it because in order for a ground loop to cause noise, there has to be a different current draw to ground. Without getting super technical, basically, if one of these was a really heavy draw electric motor like an air conditioner, and the other one was really not that much current draw, then the difference between the two would cause a noise. If they're very similar, like the current draw from this thing and the current draw from this thing are pretty similar, so it's possible that you may not get any noise at all whatsoever. So you don't always hear noise. Sometimes you do if you have multiple components that have different grounds, different grounding locations, and we'll get to that in a minute. And then you have differing current loads from each of the components that you're dealing with. So let's say you had a Kemper and a tube amp, and you were running both of those. The tube amp's going to pull a lot more current than the Kemper. So chances are you're going to hear noise from that if you have a ground loop situation. So remember when we were talking about our drawing, a lot of times if the thing's grounded in two different places, this will also cause a problem. not just current difference between the two, but also where it's grounded. So let's say we have our Kemper plugged into the outlet on this wall, and it's one circuit in the house. And then we have the mixing board plugged into the outlet on that wall, and it's in a different circuit in the house. And what if we have the air conditioner running on the same circuit as the mixer, and we have the refrigerator or something else running on the same circuit as the Kemper? Now you have all kinds of potential for different ground potentials on each of those circuits, then being crossed over through this audio line. Possibility for more noise. Again, has nothing to do with the guitar. It's all to do with where the stuff is grounded. Practical terms for this would be when we go out to play, let's say you have this Kemper and you go to the mixing board and you plug your direct out lines into the mixing board. Maybe the mixing board is on a different circuit than the Kemper is on a different circuit. What then? It has a ground lift in there that redirects the ground so that it's not in a loop. It is still grounded, but it is not in a loop. It grounds kind of through it instead of to the ground itself. Another scenario could be is with your pedal board power supply is one kind of big circuit, and then you also have your amp, and those are both plugged into two different outlets. Most of the time, if you have a quality power supply in your pedal board, it's going to have isolation transformers that is going to break that ground plane so you don't have ground loops. And as long as your pedal board is wired correctly and all the solders are good and everything, you'll be fine as long as you have a quality power supply. The ones we really like, I'll put a link to them in the description. I think they're fantastic. It's a switching power supply. It's quiet. It's easier to deal with load-wise and everything, and you don't have to worry about a lot of this stuff. It kind of just fixes all of those problems. Another way to combat the ground loop situation is, first of all, don't ever cut the ground thing off of your plug. People will say, well, I'll just cut the ground tab off of one of my amps, or I will bring one of those little adapters and I'll plug it into the wall. Don't do that. If you do that, you are taking a shortcut. You are not a smart person, and you may die. It is that serious. I have known people, and it has actually happened to me personally, where I have actually put my mouth up to the microphone, and someone has done that, and there was a ground loop, and they cut the ground off to cause that, and then something wasn't grounded, and I actually got shocked in my mouth. That could actually kill a singer, or it could kill a guitar player. Here's why. If you're playing a guitar, I don't know if you guys know this or not, it's a little side point, but if you're playing guitar like this, right, you basically have wires going across your chest, and if you got shocked, it would literally send current straight across your chest and kill you. It's not smart. Don't ever cut any ground stuff off of anything. Instead, use isolated power supplies in your pedal board, and also, if you have a home studio, make sure that all of your equipment that talks to each other, audio-wise, so my mixing board and my Kemper, and probably my laptop, and all that stuff that works together, make sure that it is on the same isolated, if possible, and if not, at least the same power strip going into the same plug in the wall. So then they all have a shorter distance to ground. They all have like a more equal distance to ground, and then it keeps everything quieter. Don't have this plugged into one circuit over there, this plugged into one circuit over there. If you have the luxury, make sure that the room that you record in doesn't have any other things on the same circuit as it, like refrigerators, toasters, air conditioners, any high current, even televisions, high current kind of stuff. Make sure that you could kind of separate that in your house to where it's on its own little circuit. You've got one source of power going into the wall. This, and my laptop are on the same power strip going into the wall. When you play out live in a bar somewhere, make sure that you have, if you're playing direct with a device like this, you have a way to lift one of the grounds to break that ground loop. Not cut it off, but lift it with an internal ground lift, like this one does. It has a button on the back. Make sure that all of your pedal board and your amp and everything in your space, plugs into one plug. That will minimize ground loops. Ground loops don't happen in the guitar. They happen on the floor. And on the floor and in your other devices. And they can be fixed. Well, somebody mentioned some EHX pedal to fix ground hum. I looked it up. It's a comb filter. It tones Rob's tone, man. Don't use, what I would recommend here is, I'm not saying don't ever use a noise gate, don't ever use some kind of comb filter like that. But if you have this problem, don't just go buy a pedal and put it with it to fix the problem. I have a noise gate right here, right? Like I could just turn up my noise gate and fix it. But that's not the problem. Make sure that you fix the problem first. Go through and make sure that all of your solders and all of your cables are good, because that can screw up ground potential between components. Or get new cables. We have awesome ones. Make sure that you plug everything into one place and make sure that everything is grounded. You don't want to cut anything off. And once you have all that sorted out and you still have some hum that you can't get rid of, then maybe you can put a Band-Aid on it. But don't start with the Band-Aid, because you might be just masking a problem and losing tone in the process. My name is Dylan. This is Dylan Talks Tone. Do me a favor. Put it in the comments below what you think about this stuff. Let me know how you've solved it. Like legit solves though, you know what I mean? Like give me some other suggestions. Like have you figured out ways to run your power and stuff to make everything quieter? You know, anybody can throw a noise gate on it or some kind of pedal on it, but that's not a real fix. Understanding the problem is a real fix. And if you have other questions about shielding the guitar, how all that works in there, Faraday cages are stupid. They don't really work. Star grounding doesn't matter. That's a dumb thing. You know, there's some of that stuff that just does not matter in the guitar because people misunderstand this. So if you have questions about that, we can dive deeper into that. I already have some good videos on it, but we can dive deeper into that if you want. So that's it. I'll tell you what, let's go over some comments from a couple of the last videos because we had a few. Let's do it. Well, as you can see, the studio is evolving. I got a monitor now. So I got some cool stuff coming too, different changes and stuff, just trying to make it more efficient. All right, let's go over some comments, some questions. We got some really good ones. A couple little more technical things that we're going to try to quickly run through, but these are really good questions. Let's see. What is recommended for lubricant of all the friction points once these issues have been fixed? He's talking about a Bigsby video where we talked about friction and making sure that your nut was correctly lubed. Anyway, Lizard Spit makes some stuff that's amazing. It's graphite based. I'll put a link to it in the video, the description of this video. Really, really good stuff. I really like it. Eat and Sleep says, hi Dylan, you talk about 4 criteria to choose a pickup. I think this can be engineered by setting the EQ. However, in one video you said that the reason to change pickups is clarity, dynamics, definition, etc. Yeah, so you can do a lot with EQ. You're right. However, on a passive guitar, EQ is only cutting. So when we, and a lot of amps actually, is really only cutting frequencies. You can't put stuff back into it. And on a lot of levels throughout the guitar tone structure, like no matter what you're doing, pedals, amps, anything, if you only start with something that's very narrow that can make a tone from here to here, then you can never get what's over here. So making a pickup that has a very wide range, dynamic range, like you can get from, you know, extreme lows to extreme crispy highs, having a wider dynamic range then gives you a lot more room to EQ within. But there are pickups that are so narrow that you can't get outside of that no matter what you do, because the pickup cannot do it. So that's really the thing. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll tell you what, I appreciate y'all watching the videos. Over 15,000 subscribers now, man. Super cool. I actually had a guy the other day accuse me of buying subscribers with a bot, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is so funny. I really appreciate everybody that listens. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next time.